Right. Hello, it's Jenny here from the A to Z of Emotional Health online library, and I'm here with Dermot Nolan from Math Support Online. Dermot, emotional health, as you know, is a real passion for me. I think it is so relevant to education, a mainstream education. What are your thoughts about this?
Thank you, Jenny. I totally agree with you. And in fact, in the last week, I've had to make a presentation to my team at school. I'm a maths teacher. I've been teaching for over 30 years. And this has become a really, really important issue for me. The trends are showing that young people are under enormous pressure. And I think part of that is to do with societal changes. I think obviously that there's things like social media. There's things like bullying that used to be just at school. Students could just go home and escape from it, whereas now they can't because it follows through on media. But on top of all that, I think expectations at school by the schools, but also by parents and the students themselves, puts huge amounts of pressure on young people. And we're seeing a lot more young people actually contacting services like Childline to talk about how anxious it makes them feel. So I actually did a presentation with my team just in the last week, saying that we need to really take a leading role, I believe. At the moment, education is driven by data because it's so important that schools produce certain results to meet the targets that they're set. Whereas for me, I think we should be paying far more attention to the individual well-being of each child. Yes, obviously we want them to try and do the best they can do, but within the parameters of them staying healthy, both physically and mentally as well. So I would say it's basically just talking about some of the things that we should be looking out for, and it should be in the forefront of our mind when we are talking to young people in schools about the work that they're doing, and if they're falling behind, maybe trying to be a little bit more understanding of the situations that they're in, because these are human beings that have life and pressure outside of the classroom as well.
Of course, of course. It's interesting, Dermot, because in my experience, I think if we are under pressure, we're actually less able to absorb and really digest information.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think you're hearing what you're saying about the current trend of pressure for data. I think one of the concerns that I have is that there isn't enough awareness of the emotional impact, and by that I mean a detrimental impact of the level of pressure that is put on young people, on children, to achieve what I would call the academic results at the expense of their kind of core self-esteem and their core well-being.
Absolutely.
Actually the reality is, for any of us, adults or children, if we are under pressure and we start to feel anxious, we are less able to absorb and digest information and to retain it. I think it's a bit like, this is going to seem like a peculiar example to give, but I think it's quite a relevant one. If we think about something that can happen to all of us in everyday life, we can lose someone, so bereavement. When I talk to people about bereavement, I describe it as being like a background program that is running. And so it's a bit like if we were a computer, you set a program running, it arrived like a download out of your control, and it has to run its course, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
And actually, when you run a big program, every other program on your computer will begin to slow down, and some will cease to function altogether. So for me, that's how I describe bereavement, because most people will struggle at a core level of functionality.
Sure.
And actually rightly so. Actually in that moment, what we need to do is to prioritize their well-being, their self-care, and particularly their emotional well-being, because that's an emotional journey. And I suppose what I think happens at schools, I might seem a peculiar thing to liken it to, but in exactly the same way, if we put someone under pressure, or they are under pressure, either externally from school by, as you said, maybe by bullying, or, just life events that are going on for them anyway, or even at school, then maybe they are not of a particularly academic leaning. Maybe that their core qualities are much more suited to a hands-on profession or a caring profession. Because I think those qualities are kind of slightly undervalued in our current education system. In fact, I probably, to use the word slightly, I think, if I'm honest, is a bit of an understatement. I think that level of pressure is a bit like a download. The moment we're under pressure, the moment we're integrating messages that say, I'm not good enough, if I don't achieve this, I won't be accepted, or I won't get a job, or I won't be this, and I'm no good at this. All of the stream of stuff that comes along with the pressure to achieve a very specific criteria.
Yeah.
It raises anxiety. And the moment that starts to happen, it is like a background program running. Because I think we know if we go to something, we're anxious, we're actually having to deal with the anxiety as well as the something that we have to deal with as well. And I really feel that this is happening across the board at the moment in our education system, probably actually not only to the young people, but to teachers as well. There's this background program running that in essence reduces our capacity to function at our best, to be our best. Either to deliver or to absorb and to digest. I mean, I've sort of in a rather long-winded way talked about something, but I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. I mean, I've seen, as I've said before, I've seen a growing trend of students suffering with incredible anxiety and depression, feeling really low, and yet we're still expecting them to perform to their best in exams. When in fact, as you said, there's lots of things going on in their lives. I mean, teenagers, as we know, that there's hormonal changes, there's self-esteem issues, talking about their own self-image and self-worth. And if we then also put on top of that this pressure to perform in academic exams, when you quite rightly pointed out that not everyone's talent is academic. And yet, for some reason in society, we only seem to value the academic qualification. And I do think that it's wrong, but it's the way it is. And I think we need to be mindful of that. And I think we need to try and help young people develop strategies for coping with that and for recognizing that this is normal and it's okay. And if they're feeling like that, what should they do about it?
I think for me there's two issues in what you've just said, both of which are equally valid. One is that this is how it is, and I think in acknowledging that, to my mind, whenever we identify a problem, it offers us an opportunity to consider what we need to do about it. And for me, there are two avenues of thought going on. One is, how do we, in the immediacy of now, support young people in understanding that this is how it is, and this system is not a reflection of them personally, because in many ways one of the big contributors to low self-esteem is actually children, indeed as human beings, adults too, in feeling that we're kind of not worthy, that we're not good enough. So if we are recognizing that our education system, simply by default, it has a focus only on academic achievement, that automatically, sadly, kind of actually upholds a form of inequality, and it leaves a certain proportion of people, young people, feeling as though they don't make the grade. I have very sort of, I could get on my soapbox on that one, because I have very strong feelings about it, because we're lacking in the world, we're lacking in kindness, we're lacking in, also we're needing certain professions, and yet we're not at a core level of education instigating an environment that honours the values and the personal attributes that would offer that are needed in those professions. So, but I mean, that's kind of a whole other conversation. But coming back to your point, it's twofold for me. One is, how do we help young people right now?
Yeah.
And how do we help them appreciate that this is not a reflection of them, this is the system that they're in. Also, the second, of course, is what we do to change this. You know, how do we reach our politicians, our leaders, and, you know, actually get our message across? How do we actually say to them, look, you are currently, the educational policies that you are currently advocating are actually producing an environment of inequality, and they are creating a long-term problem. You know, we already see that there are problems in, you know, a lack of, you know, people to fulfill certain professions. As I said, carers are desperately needed in the world. And yet people whose leaning would be more of an empathic, caring nature are left feeling unworthy.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't make that seem as though it's a profession worth going into, you know, and yet it's so essential. So I suppose for me, as I said, there's how do we help young people? How do we get a message across to the people who create our educational policies? And how do we get them to on board with recognizing that that we really do need to instigate some real and significant change here. If we're going to have, you know, a healthy, thriving, you know, communities of people who have good self-esteem, who are able to honor and value their unique individual contributions in a really equal way.
Totally agreed, and I think that's important, that we need to deal with the here and now, as you say, but also think about the future and how we can bring about some change. I do know that the current government, Theresa May, has actually instigated some discussions in Parliament about mental health generally, which is a good thing.
I agree completely, wholeheartedly.
But my kind of issue with that is that talking about it is one thing, but actually putting investments and actually doing anything about it is another. And what we've seen in schools at the moment, and I think probably out there in society as well, is cutbacks. And there were lots of people in schools up until this point who were more caring and were available to help students who maybe had emotional or behavioural difficulties. But they're the sorts of cutbacks that have been sort of taken out of schools. I mean, you know, lots of redundancies, and there's less support now available for students in schools. So I think why...
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because in a way what you're saying is, I think, that the pressures are increasing, but the support networks to offer what's needed for young people to navigate those pressures is actually reducing. So we've kind of got a real problem here.
Yeah, we have. I mean, it's a real shame, because I think that that more and more is falling on individual teachers to not only you know, teach and prepare and so on and so forth, but they also have to be the support network themselves. So this is why I gave the presentation earlier last week to try and raise awareness that as teachers we have to take this on board, and we have to be mindful of young people's state of mind, because it's very easy to sort of think, oh, you know, as a teacher I've got to make sure my class, you know, a certain percentage of my class get this grade or that grade because that's my target, but actually, you know, if there are students in that class who are struggling, I think we need to be more mindful of that than what grade they're going to get.
I agree wholeheartedly, and actually my inclination is, from an emotional perspective, that actually if we don't support them, it is far more likely that they won't get that grade.
Yeah.
Because actually the more supportive we are, the more we are able to learn, the more we are able to have a go at something, even if it's not our leaning, and really achieve the very best that we can. But if we're not feeling good about ourselves, if we are, you know, full of negative emotions, it's going to be even harder. It's really going to make this an uphill battle. So, you know, I'm with you 100%. Dermot, thank you so much for sharing these insights, and for having the conversation with me, because, you know, as you know, I'm very passionate about looking at the ways that emotional health integrates into all aspects of our lives. And ultimately, you know, education, our young people are at school a lot of the time for a huge proportion of their waking life. So this is an area of their world that has an enormous influence, and it's also an area that can be helped by the changing of policies, and also, actually, I'm going to say, by individual people such as you, who do go the extra mile and you know, make presentations, raise the awareness. So you know, thank you beyond measure, not only for having the conversation, but actually for the work that you do.
Well, and thank you too for your experts' insight into these things, because I think people like you obviously will help people like me to understand better how to support the young people that are in my care. So I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
You are very welcome, and actually me too. I hope this is the first of many conversations, actually, Dermot. You know, I think we both share a passion, and if we can help one another in any way, I mean, you know, I'm totally there and available.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
And you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.